Today we will be dealing with lease deeds. So the name itself says what kind of a deed it is. It is a lease deed. So lease itself is payment for asset use. So it's like when you are using an asset and you have to pay for that. It is actually for a period of time. That is lease. So lease, we are going to talk about lease deed and what exactly lease deed contains. So lease deed is agreement for a real estate use between owner and owner, that is the lessor, and the tenant, the lessee. So when you are renting out, in short or informally we can say that when you rent it out, rent your property or your building, then here comes the lease deed. So it is between the owner and the tenant. So it governs landlord-tenant relationship, outline lease conditions. So what exactly it does? It includes about the landlord and the tenant relationship. Maybe they can say that okay, it is for 2 years of lease, and this is the payment, and this you can use, this room you can't use. So it outlines all the conditions, like how the payment has to be done. Everything will be written in the lease deed. Now it provides precise record for disputes, covers various properties. It is actually something where you have a dispute resolution, to solve the issue if there is any issue. So it is a record for precise record for disputes and covers various properties. And legal advice crucial for fair complete agreement. So whatever happens in lease or any other deed, it is not like you can't solve with the deed itself. So basically you may have to have a legal advice. So that is very crucial for a fair and complete agreements. Basically when you are going for a lease, make sure that you have a legal advice when you are making a deed. That will help you to have a fair and also a complete agreement. Now let's look into different types of lease deeds. So first type is residential lease deeds, where it is about the residential. The name itself says the residential lease deeds. So when you are going for a rent to a flat or maybe an apartment, so residential lease deeds comes into play. Commercial lease deeds, where it talks about the commercialized one or the business entities or the companies. So there it comes about the lease agreement or the lease deed is known as commercial lease deeds. Ground lease deeds, the property, the plot, that is also ground lease deeds. And deeds for equipment leases. So if an equipment, a machinery, if it is being given for a lease, or a vehicle, if it is being given for a lease, then it is known as deeds for equipment leases. Then agricultural lease deeds, as the name itself says, for the agricultural purpose. If you are leasing your land or property for the agriculture, then it is known as agricultural lease deeds. So these are the different types of lease deeds. Now, what is the purpose of lease deeds? So, we have to understand that when you are writing a lease deed, or when you are hearing the term lease deed, you have to know why this lease deed. So, basically it established legal renting agreement. It basically gives a rental agreement which is legal, which is enforceable, where it writes about the rights and obligations, rights and duties of both the owner as well as the tenant. Then it gives the detailed legal lease terms and responsibilities. So basically in a lease deed, what all things will be written? The terms, the responsibility, the rights, the obligations, everything of the owner and the tenant will be written, and it is actually one of the purposes of lease deed. Then ensures fairness and protect interest. It is fair enough because basically when you are entering into a contract, it is actually a contracted deed where you both are signing with the legal advice. It makes it fair and protect the interest. Now next one is set property usage policies. So certain policies will be there, certain guidelines on the lease, unlike ownership transfer. Certain rights and things which you need to remember. You can't take this, you can't utilize this particular thing or a particular room. So that guidelines will be properly mentioned. Property usage policies, how to use the property when it is given for the lease. Then outline extension or termination steps, that also will be covered, so that it will be easy for the owner as well as a tenant. Then define dispute resolution. It will be given a solve or a solution will be written. Like what will happen if it is being infringed, if it is being not done by the tenant or maybe by the owner. So it will be a definition of the dispute resolution will be given, a dispute will be given in the lease agreement or the lease deed. Then specify deposit return process. So that is important, consideration or the money. So in a contract you need, in a always in a deed or in a contract we need offer, acceptance and consideration. So without money or the how it is being dealt by the owner and the tenant, it has to be recorded, and in a lease deed it will be specify about the deposit return process, how they will return the money or the something whatever in value, that has to be specifically mentioned. So these are the purpose of lease deeds. Now let's look into the some common contents which are being included in the lease deeds. So the first one is the landlords and the tenants names and addresses. Obviously you need that, because you have to under the address as well, not only the names, the address of the tenants and the owners. Then a description of the rental property. So a description, as we had already mentioned in the deed, the property description will be given. Similarly, in lease deed, you have to give a description on the rental property. Exactly what what are things are there. For example, residential deed. There you lease deed, then you have to say that okay, these many furnitures or maybe the air condition or whatever, if it is a furnished one. So the details or the description of the rental property should be given. Amount and timing of the rent, very important, because what is the extension, the duration, as well as the time when you are entering into, that is very important. Then deposit amount for security and conditions, must also be included, or these are one of the important element is about the deposit amount as well. Then the duration of the lease, then tenant and landlord maintenance and repair obligations. Very, because if you are not including all these in when you are writing a legal deed or maybe lease deed, you have to make sure that you are including the terms which is about the maintenance as well as the repairing sessions, because you are leasing or renting your property, your building. So how it will be, if something, if any minor repair also, who will pay, or how the money can be given. So that should be mentioned. The terms and conditions of such things also should be mentioned in the lease deed. Then comes guidelines on how to utilize the property, on maybe how you have to maintain, or certain other rules and regulations, if any, that also must be recorded in the lease deeds. More contents. The process for extending the or ending the lease. So how, if you want to extend the lease agreement, or maybe if you want to extend that lease, then that also should be mentioned, as well as the ending the lease, that also should be mentioned in the lease deed. Then comes how to return the security deposits when the lease is over. So when the lease or that period, the duration is completed, what is the process of how you will give the amount back? That also should be written, maybe in installment or on one side by a basis. That should be written in the lease agreement. The lease is start date. So when the lease starts, that should also, because that is how the duration will be calculated. So maybe if Jan 1st you are starting from 2024 till 2026 December 31st. So the starting date should be mentioned. And landlord and the tenant's signature is very important. Maintenance and repairs, that should also be mentioned. Then termination and renewal, if you want to renew or terminate the contract, then how the deed you want to terminate, you don't want to continue that. So if you are ending it in between, as I told, like Jan 2024, 1st of Jan you are starting and ending in December 2026, but in between 2025 November you want to finish or terminate the lease deed, then that clause also should be added. Who will benefit, or maybe you have to give certain amount to the owner, or maybe you have to check what happened, then only you have to decide on the amount. So that should also be included in the termination and the renewal as well. Then any other terms or conditions that the landlord and renter have agreed upon. And maybe there may be, it differs, from one landlord to another or one renter to another. So they may have certain agreements regarding the property, regarding the usage or maybe use of the property or use of certain machines, whatever it is, it has to be written. The terms and conditions should be written in the lease deed. Now, let's look into the limitations of lease deeds. So, there are a few limitations as well. Limited flexibility. So, flexibility is limited. Legal protection for renters are a bit, sometimes, you can't find all protection for the renters. At times, there may be, you can see some limitations. Sometimes you can see limitations on the landlord protection as well in some of the lease deeds, and limited enforceability. At times, it shows that this can't be enforceable, and limited applicability as well. So these are the limitations of lease deed. I hope you all understood about lease deed. Thank you so much.